Call Don now, 682-1270. News Talk 1270 KIML.
News Talk 1270 KIML. Don Carpenter Show. And welcome back. And we're going to welcome a special guest to the show right now. We have Tom Stossel from the American Enterprise Institute, also the author of Pharmaphobia, How the Conflict of Interest Myth Undermines American Medical Innovation. Good morning, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Don.
Oh, it's my pleasure. When I heard about this book and I heard about the premise, it sounded like something it's very interesting and something I've kind of been interested in for a while. So first off, why don't we talk a little bit about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, I'm a physician and I'm old. I just realized that on your news show there, I'm 1 year younger than Pete Rose. Oh my God! And I've been in medicine for almost 50 years. My specialty is hematology, blood diseases, but mostly what I did was medical research. And in the course of doing that over that long time span, it was becoming obvious to me that despite the fact that all we hear is whining about the cost of medical care, that the value was improving enormously. And I was in my academic bubble doing this research, and it was only when I had some experience where I was asked to consult for a biotechnology company, a medical products company, that I realized that the reason things were getting so much better, and let's just put some examples. You know, we live on average 10 years longer. You're 60% less likely to die of a heart attack or a stroke. You just don't see people crippled up with arthritis the way it was when my career started. And that the dominant reason for that is not the kind of research I was doing in an academic institution. It was the tools that healthcare providers were getting from the medical products industry. And I also learned when I had that experience how difficult and expensive those innovations are. And if you're interested, I can put some numbers on it. They're staggering. So it was just at that time, and we're talking around 1990, that I had this sort of realization about these facts that folks that I call pharmaphobes, and by the way, it's PH, not F, pharmaphobes, came out of the woodwork and started denying these facts. Oh, no, industry doesn't innovate. It just profiteers, and it's corrupt. And if doctors or medical researchers like me work with the industry and get paid for it, we're corrupt. And the code name for this corruption is conflict of interest. And so the based on those personal experiences, that was the reason why I wrote the book. One, to get those facts across, and two, to blow up the myths, the laundry list of corruption allegations, and then a lot of stifling regulations that have come out of that are bad for our health.
Well, now you mentioned that doctors work with private industry, and it seems like in just about every other industry, whether it's computers or rocket science or any major industry, most people understand that the private industry, they're the ones that do the innovation. Obviously, in the medical field, you need doctors, you need researchers, you need people with medical degrees. Why is it that you think that the medical profession is vilified for teaming up with these with the pharmaceutical companies?
Well, it's a great question, Don, and part of it is, I think people don't appreciate this, comes out of the history of medicine. So unlike some of these other fields, now obviously computers didn't exist in distant past, but people have gotten sick since the beginning of time, and what passed for physicians, they couldn't do anything until science got into medicine. Doctors could do nothing and therefore had very low status. And to try to remedy that, they foisted themselves off as priestly figures. They wore robes. So that's why diseases have Latin and Greek terms. And actually, it didn't work very well because priests don't have to prove they get you into heaven, and it was all too obvious that doctors weren't saving lives. So when when science got into medicine and doctors could actually help people, this kind of priestly baggage wasn't necessary. But for interesting historical reasons, in the last century, partly because of these snake oil patent medicines that were available, and doctors were in competition with it, and also a lot of what came to be known as medical ethics, which are very sort of moralistic, bullying precepts, were really about keeping competition out. And so this kind of priestly thing has had legs, and that's been, I think, is a major factor in why it's been so hard to get people to understand, look, medicine's a business. It's a huge business. And for it not to be considered as a business is just crazy.
Well, and it's probably the only profession like that where people think that the practitioners are maybe lawyers too. I mean, but everybody bags on lawyers until they need one. But it's kind of the same with doctors. I mean, you don't hear anyone complaining that Steve Jobs made a lot of money for inventing the iPhone, but somebody cures a form of cancer, and they're, again, vilified if they take any money for it. It seems kind of strange.
Right, and, part of this is it has to do with the fact that, there are never enough resources to do all the things we want to do. And so you have doctors, hospitals, the medical products industry, the insurance companies, all grubbing for those limited resources. And unfortunately, all the finger-pointing has been directed at industry, and one of the points I make in the book is that industry's done a very poor job of explaining the economics. I mean, I referred earlier to the numbers. Let me just rattle those off. Right now, it costs, on average, $2.6 billion and takes 16 years to get a new drug approved by the FDA. That's 100 times more expensive than when I started out almost 50 years ago. Now, some of the reason for that is that FDA oversight to determine effectiveness and safety of these drugs that are up for approval has gotten more stringent, but nowhere near 100 times more stringent. It's that a little increased stringency is engrafted on an ugly fact, which is that biology is a bitch. It's just really hard. Now, it's not intuitively obvious we can build planes that fly themselves, and it's because we make them predictable. They're fully predictable. They work beautifully, but we human beings are unpredictable. Well, the good news about that is you and I are talking, Don, because we're unpredictable. Bacteria, which basically rule the world, can mutate every 20 minutes, and they're coming after us all the time. If we were predictable, they'd have wiped us out eons ago. That's the good news. The bad news is that you put a device or a drug into people that looked great in the laboratory in test tubes, maybe even worked in animals. 9 out of 10 fail because of that unpredictability. And that means that the one success has to pay for the 9 failures. And when people start to complain about the high prices of medical products, they don't know that.
Well, and I think a lot of that extra cost comes from regulations. I mean, do you see the regulations being spurred on by this idea that there might be conflicts of interest?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it actually cut the FDA a lot of slack. The government's gotten into this, and I'll explain specifically how that is, but the pharmaphobes have succeeded with these myths and getting some really ridiculous government regulations. But I do want to say that the FDA is probably the best game in town for determining the safety and effectiveness of medical products. I'm not like my brother John Stossel, who's on your network.
I didn't want to ask, but I didn't want to ask.
Yeah, he's all libertarian all the time. He's just as soon get rid of the FDA. But I think it's the devil we know. And it's much the information. And so one regulation that has been imposed is that most academic health centers and many private practices have banned having company representatives talk to their doctors. Now, the information that these representatives tell the doctors has been approved by the FDA. That is an extensive, comprehensive analysis compared to what academics who are publishing in medical journals, I've cluttered up medical journals with my own articles, and it's important for the advance of science, but it's not the optimal way to get information to doctors. But one of the regulations is to have this separation between company information and doctors, and you want your doctor to have the most up-to-date information about a product. Nobody knows more and better about it than the companies. That's bad.
Well, now, so you're saying that you're not saying that there should be no regulations and no worry about conflict of interest, but they've gone a little bit overboard.
Well, where it's gone, I mean, any enterprise as big as the interface between industry and medicine, bad things are going to happen. People are going to do dumb things. They're going to do evil things, and when they do, they should be corrected, or if they're evil, punished. But in the conflict of interest domain, we have what I call prophylactic regulations. Say, oh no, this looks bad. This looks like you might, and the theory is if you work with a company and you get paid, you're going to lie and cheat to get the money. Actually, there's no evidence for that. 95% of scientific fraud is purely academic, has no commercial contact at all, and it's obvious why that is, because the FDA will never approve fraudulent results. So this prophylactic regulation that says in advance what some committee or some bureaucrat decides you can't do, it's just like if you couldn't own a fast car. Instead of the cops pulling you over and fining you for speeding, say, no, you can't have a car that goes over the speed limit. Well, obviously we don't. Most of our economy doesn't work like that.
Well, it almost seems like there's an entire cottage industry built up just around attacking the medical products industry. I mean, the doctor, I mean, the lawyers and the reporters. I mean, it seems like there's a whole industry. I mean, is that perception wrong or?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, as I said, it was just about the time that I learned about the value of industry that these academics came out and discovered they could get promoted. They could make a career out of beating up on industry. And most of them have no experience with industry. They're total armchair analysts. And as you said, the media, obviously for all kinds of reasons, I love the media, but corruption sells, whether it really exists or not. And the lawyers are the biggest culprits. I mean, they win no matter what. They win if they're suing you. They win if they're defending you. They win especially, the more regulations, the better, because then you have to pay them to figure out how to comply with those regulations. And then there's one a lawyer game in particular that I discuss in the book that has to do with these huge settlements that you read about. The companies pay billions to the government. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, sure.
So if you can bear with me, I'll try not to glaze you over. It's really interesting. I used to think that, this is terrible. I want to defend industry, and they're being fined, these gargantuan fines. They must be doing bad stuff. And then I realized, wait a minute, it's not what it's cracked up to be. What it is it's a creative legal strategy, is to use what is called false claims litigation. Now, false claims is billing the government for services you didn't provide. So Medicare fraud, Medicaid fraud would be examples of that. But there's some unique features of false claims litigation that result in the way this game is played. So remember, it's the doc. So I have to back off and say a doctor can prescribe a drug, let's say, that's been approved for something, but it can prescribe it for anything else. That's called off-label prescribing. Off-label prescribing is very common. Now, the company can only promote the drug for what it's been approved for. So what the prosecutor does is uses the false claims to go after the company for off-label promotion. But remember, it's the doctor who writes the prescription. It's not the company. So the prosecutor would have to prove that the company's marketing made the doctor uncontrollably prescribe this product. A doctor that's gone to medical school, that's had postgraduate training, that's intelligent, that's ridiculous. You'd never win a case like that. But the cases never go to trial. They always settle. Why? The reason is that false claims has a punishment called debarment. Not disbarment, debarment. I've never seen that word in a media account of these huge settlements. Debarment means your company cannot do business with the federal government for any of your products. That means you can't sell to Medicare, Medicaid, the Veterans Administration. These are the biggest purchasers of your drugs or devices. That's capital punishment. That's why the companies always settle. And the conflict of interest sort of rhetoric about how that it says that doctors become corrupt and they're too stupid and gullible to know the difference between marketing and evidence is what's behind it.
Sure. Now, and then once they settle, doctors can continue prescribing the medication, the off-label prescriptions, and things just go on. It's almost like an old school mafia kickback, where the guy comes to your store, he collects the money, you're protected for a while.
Well, I mean, the doctors could prescribe. They could prescribe before, during, and after the prosecution. The prosecutors aren't going after the doctors because they don't have the big pockets. They're going after the companies. And to be clear here, this is not kickback. The off-label prescribing. Remember, since none of these cases are tried, there's never proof that the company actually marketed the drug off-label. It's all tangential stuff, like insinuation that the company funded a Christmas party at the hospital and encouraged Dr. A to tell Dr. B about the off-label use. There's just nothing there.
Right.
A lot of billions of dollars are diverted from where they should be going, which is to research, product development, medical education, into paying these fines, and the money's sitting in the government.
Now, and not to stick on the off-label thing for too long, but so doctors are basically getting the ideas for these off-label, and they can get it from medical journals and things that were tested for medications that were tested for other things, or maybe uses of the drug for off-label in other countries. The company has nothing to do with it. The doctors are finding these things out on their own, right?
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. That's most medical information comes to doctors from colleagues.
Okay, so now you've mentioned that this it's basically an industry, this conflict of interest industry. What kind of impact has it had on development of new drugs or research?
Okay, well, in the book, I explain how it slowed it down. And timing is everything. I tell the story in the book about my brother-in-law who came down with a cancer that at the time up to that time was incurable, and a new drug just happened to come online. He got into a clinical trial. He's alive and well 15 years later. I describe other cases like that. So months can make a difference. So slowing things down is not something we should be tolerating. And so the ability of doctors to partner with companies and to do research because of all the oversight and the theory of cheating and lying that leads to the looking over the shoulder slows things down, just slows things down. I mentioned that the not allowing information to come to doctors. We can have great new products, but if doctors don't know about them and know how to use them properly, it's not going to help patients. So that's an example of a regulation. Now, here's another one that has actually got itself into the Affordable Care Act. That's a 2.3% tax on medical devices. And the reason that got passed is because the pharmaphobes, through their denial of the facts, persuaded the Congress that, oh, well, it's not that hard. These companies can afford it, and that's how we'll pay to get everybody insured. Well, the big companies can't afford to pay the tax. The problem is that the cutting edge of innovation is in small companies that are running on fumes. And so that if those small companies can't eventually have an exit to the big companies, their products will never get to patients. And if the big companies are frittering away assets on paying this tax, they don't have the wherewithal to pick up the small companies. And so that not only is a diversion of resources, but which is probably the major damage that is caused by this mindset.
Well, and you mentioned a lot of the regulations prohibit just basic communication between doctors and researchers and the industry. I mean, it almost seems like someone would eventually bring that up as a First Amendment issue. I mean, it's just basic communication.
Well, that's very interesting. There is a little crack in the door. There have been a couple of cases where, having to do with this off-label promotion, because the off-label use, if it hasn't gone through extensive trials that are required for getting the label to get FDA approval, but oftentimes it's pretty clear that something works. And if that information is truthful, it does come under what's called commercial speech, and companies are saying they should be allowed to exert that right. Now, the conflict of interest mindset has gotten so powerful and so sort of buried itself into the psyche. I'm not totally optimistic that this free speech approach is going to move this along, but I'm an optimist. I certainly hope it would. And everybody has an agenda. If you're the manager of a practice who says, "Oh, we don't want those evil marketers talking to our doctors. We only want them reading medical journals." What the practice manager really wants is the doctor sitting in the cubicle seeing a patient every 15 minutes, rather than taking time off to talk to a drug rep or do research or partner with a company.
Well, now. And maybe this is just something that I thought of, but do you think this conflict of interest myth has been buried in people's heads so much because they've heard horror stories of medical companies flying doctors out to 5-star resorts and giving them open bars and free food for a week and golf and all that kind of stuff? Do you think a lot of it, I mean, does it just come from people not really understanding how the medical industry communicates with doctors? Because, I mean, I seriously doubt a lot of that stuff is going on, but everybody's heard the stories. It's kind of almost like an urban myth at this point.
That's a great question. So it's one of my favorite chapters in the book. It's chapter 13. It's called The Gift Smokescreen. And if you think about it, Don, throughout our entire economy, doing things in pleasant circumstances is not considered evil, right? That it actually at professional meetings, most of the productive work gets done sitting at the bar, networking with colleagues, rather than sitting in an auditorium listening to somebody give a talk. You see, that has some value. But that where is it? Who decreed that education in a monastery, sitting on a bed of nails that you had to pay for, is better than interacting in pleasant circumstances? But that said, it goes back to this priestly business. The demonization of anything but adversarial relationships with industry have long legs. So, as you say, as a result of this, the resorts, the open bars are pretty much gone. I'm not sure we're better off for that. It's certainly, in terms of expense, medical products are 13% of total medical expenses. I'm sure if you go to a health insurance convention, that there's plenty of partying and stuff being handed out. But here's what's so fascinating about it, is this gift thing was so clever, because forget about the being sent to resorts. A pen, a mug, a sticky pad, bring in a cup of coffee to the doctor. This has all been decreed as evil. And it's now national policy. So here's another Affordable Care Act pharmaphobe consequence. Are you familiar with the Sunshine Act?
Oh, of course, yes.
$10 payment, a $10 payment from a company to a doctor has to be reported to the federal government, and you can go to a website and look it up. Now, why would you want to do that? You got 15 minutes to spend with your doctor. Do you want to talk about your symptoms, or you want to talk about who's paying the doctor? It's the last thing you want to know. Where was your doctor trained? What's your doctor's track record? What's your doctor's bedside manner? It's really, really insulting. And all it's been used for is for shaming. So there are some media outlets that look up the doctors who get paid for speaking to other doctors and make them look bad.
Well,
but that aside,
go ahead.
This is an example of diverting scarce resources from what ought to be going to research, product development, education, into compliance with this reporting. It's really expensive figuring out, for the companies to figure out what did they give to what doctors, and they have to hire more lawyers to wade through the legal gibberish in this Sunshine Act. It is unbelievable that this is national policy.
Well, and I honestly think a little bit of it has to do with playing to the jealousy of the average person who, might not work at a job that he gets to fly out and attend these conferences and stuff. So what do you think? What do you think as we move ahead? What do you think the American people and the medical industry and everyone else involved can do to kind of clear up some of this? Because it's almost like there's a log jam now. It needs to be cleared up. What can we do?
Well, you have to understand it. I'd say what I hope is the value of the book is it explains and demystifies a lot of stuff that people just don't know. And, medicine is very technical. I tried to make it user-friendly. I hope I succeeded. I hope people will give me feedback where I failed and can do better. But once you understand how medical innovation and education really work, once you understand some of the historical baggage that is weighing it down, once you understand how people have taken advantage of the ignorance and the baggage for their own purposes, and how that's slowing down innovation, it really isn't rocket science for the public to say, hey, we've got to stop this. This is ridiculous. Now, I beat up on industry. I'm an equal opportunity abuser. I think industry, as I said earlier, has done a very poor job of explaining its economics. It's been very much in the appeasement mode. It hasn't worked, and industry has the resources to fight this. And I'm not holding my breath, but I do hope that it will.
Well, it certainly seems like we're not too far down the road that this can't be reversed. We only have a couple minutes left. If anybody's interested in finding your book, Pharmaphobia, where can they find it?
Get it on Amazon.com through the publisher, Rowman and Littlefield. And there's information at the American Enterprise Institute website, aei.org.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Doctor. I can't wait to read this. It's definitely a fascinating subject, and I'd never really heard of these issues quite put this way. So it's certainly I think you're going down the right track with this. Thank you so much again, Doctor, for joining us, and hopefully we can talk to you again sometime soon.
Sure. Never been to Wyoming. Love to go sometime.
Well, I will tell you, go between about May and the beginning of October. Otherwise, it's going to be too cold. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Don.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, there you go. Tom Stossel, the author of Pharmaphobia, How the Conflict of Interest Myth Undermines American Medical Innovation. Find it on Amazon and all the usual places. I got to take a break. We'll be right back. News Talk 1270 KIML.
The best local and national news and analysis. The Don Carpenter Show on News Talk 1270 KIML.